Michael Jackson was a genius. I'm going to give you some little known facts about what he got up to in the studio. Let's dig in. So I am a huge Michael Jackson fan. I have been since I was about 5 years old. The first album I ever got was Bad on cassette, and I've been listening to Michael Jackson ever since. The other night there I went to see the movie Michael, and it kind of re-sparked something in me. So I thought I would make a wee video about him because I adore the guy. I think we all know enough about the man and enough about the music, but I thought this would be a really cool way to delve into the production side, like what happened behind the scenes. And this was kind of inspired because I was watching a YouTuber talking about the Michael video, and he was disappointed that we didn't get to see an insight into how his creative process worked. And being a long-time MJ fan and a long-time Bruce Swedien fan, I've spent hours watching interviews, documentaries and studio footage, and I just happen to know quite a few things about it. However, before we start, do you know that 90% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed? So could you just like and subscribe my videos? It doesn't cost you anything and it does amazing things for me. So Michael Jackson is a wee bit of a polarising figure because of all the controversies attached to him, but I still adore the man and I love his music. I've also had a lot of respect for Bruce Swedien, who is his long-time collaborator in the studio, as well as obviously Quincy Jones, who he did a lot of work with as well. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you 5 little-known facts about what Michael Jackson used to get up to in the studio. Number 1, Bruce Swedien was a genius. So whilst this is about Michael Jackson, I'm going to do quite a bit on Bruce Swedien because they collaborated together and did some amazing work. But Bruce Swedien was in fact an absolute genius, and his approach to recording was breathtaking. He had such a cool attitude towards making music, and it was all about the music and the performance and less about the sort of technical aspects of it. So Bruce preferred to record in stereo. Now, if you don't understand, we tend to record things in mono and then we present them out in stereo, but he actually recorded everything in stereo using lots of stereo techniques and multiple mic techniques. He called it the acoustasonic method because he wanted it to be acoustically accurate and sonically great. He believed that the acoustics of our room was really important, and also the early reflections, and he kind of felt that they added a lot to the kind of emotion of a track. So he did a lot of stereo miking techniques, and even with things that were traditionally in mono, he would tend to do them in stereo as well. The only thing that he didn't do was vocals. They were always in mono because he felt it would be a bit weird having the vocals kind of floating around a stereo space. The room acoustics thing was a big part of his workflow, and again his belief that early reflections played such a big part in stuff. That caused a few problems because things like synths weren't played in a real room. So he actually used to reamp synths through studio monitors, playing them in a live room and capturing those early reflections through stereo mic techniques. He also used to play around with the position of mics relative to backing vocals, spacing the microphone further away from the backing vocal singer, which was usually Michael Jackson, because again he wanted to have that room vibe as a part of those backing vocals. Everything had to sound stunning, it had to sound big and wide, and it had to have the emotion, and he did an incredible job capturing that. Number 2, Bruce Swedien didn't like compression. Again, this one's a bit of a weird one because we're obsessed with compression in music production, but he actually shied away from it. And if you think about how tight and amazing Michael Jackson records sounds, it's incredible to me that he didn't use any compression. He kind of controversially believed that compression was for kids, and got into a little bit of trouble for saying that. But he often talks about how much he hates compression. The only compression he actually did use was a tiny amount of compression from an 1176 when he was recording Michael's vocals, but that's it. He actually preferred to ride the Vader level rather than use a compressor. He was super into the transient response of everything that he captured, and compression, particularly when it's fast compression, can really have a negative effect on that. What he believed was that the mic choice was far more important, so he put a lot of effort into choosing the right mics for the right job. Interestingly, for Michael's vocals, particularly in the Thriller era, he used an SM7, which was a relatively cheap mic, really. Now, the SM7B is a super popular mic. If you're watching YouTube, I guarantee you one of the creators has been using an SM7B. But in a time where people were using like really expensive Neumann microphones that were costing thousands of pounds, he opted for something cheaper. Why? Because it sounded amazing on Michael's voice. There was something about the SM7 that kind of brought out the mid-range and of course the performance of Michael's voice. And again, going back to that thing I was saying earlier, like that was his thing. It was all about capturing the performance and capturing the emotion and energy of the performance. Number 3, Billie Jean was mixed over 90 times. So this one's just going to be a very quick one, but he actually did over 90 mixes of Billie Jean before settling on the one that went out to the public. He talked about the fact that his studio was literally floor to ceiling of tapes, and that's quite interesting in itself because doing 90 mixes on Pro Tools isn't that big a deal. All you need to do is basically do 90 saves, so you have 90 separate sessions, and it doesn't really cause any problems. But back in those days when they were doing it on tape, that was a big deal. You would do a mix and you would bounce it down to a master tape. So that's why he had floor to ceiling tapes, because there was 90 individual mixes on 90 individual tapes. What's funny though is that the mix that went out was mix 2. Number 4, Michael made a lot of noise recording vocals. This is something that was actually addressed in the movie. Michael, in a scene when he was recording with the Jackson 5, was getting into a lot of trouble for moving too much. And the microphone was picking up a lot of the movements and a lot of him vocalising and making noise. Bruce Swedien actually lent into this. A lot of Michael's vocals were recorded on a wood plinth, and actually the idea was that they were trying to amplify all these things. So he would stomp his feet, he would dance, he would click his fingers, he would do a lot of these vocalizations that we all know. I'm not going to do them. And the really interesting thing about that is that they're kept in because they're locking so tight. Michael Jackson's natural rhythm was super, super tight. So when you hear the isolated tracks, you're going to hear clicks, claps, stomps of the feet, all these vocalizations, and they're all in the record. They're not edited out. And again, this was all a part of trying to capture that emotion and that energy. They just ran with it. So a lot of that stuff that I would spend a lot of time editing out in between lines, it was all there. That's cool. Number 5, Michael didn't compose music using instruments. So this one's pretty amazing to me. Michael wasn't that proficient at playing musical instruments. He could basically play a few instruments like guitar and piano, but not to any kind of proficient level. How he actually composed was in his head. So he came up with ideas and melodies in his head and he vocalized them. There's demos out there in the world where you can hear him composing songs basically using his voice. So he would vocalize the bass line, vocalize the synth lines, vocalize the strings, and obviously the vocals as well. And what he would tend to do is he would have engineers and he would sing these parts to them and have them replicate that on their instruments. That famous Billie Jean bass line, he composed that in his head and then was driving down the road and started going ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da, and that became the backbone of one of the best songs of all times. He also used to beatbox drums and then have people recreate them on drum kits and drum machines. But I think it's mental that basically he couldn't play any instruments. He could fumble a few things out, but that's it. Everything was in his head and his voice, and they all became the backbone of so many songs that we all love. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you maybe learned something quite cool and interesting. Check out Michael Jackson if you haven't already. Thriller is the #1 selling album in the world ever, and it is an absolute masterpiece. Not only in production, but just great music as well. And before we go, a reminder, please like and subscribe and send me a comment below. Talk to me about your love of Michael Jackson, and I'll see you next time.